Hello, Edwina Murphy-Droomer is my name, and I want to warmly welcome you to this interview in the series where I am speaking to phenomenal feminine entrepreneurs in order to gain their insights on taking control of your future, your prosperity, and your freedom. Today, I'm delighted to introduce you to Eva Medilek. Eva, welcome, and thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Edwina. I'm so excited to be here with you.
So, Eva, for those in our audience that haven't had the pleasure of meeting you until this moment, would you tell us a little bit? I'm really introducing our audience to the stories and the ideas about how you have transitioned from doing the work that you did into the online entrepreneurial space. And I know it's a huge story and there's lots of pieces to it. Don't be afraid to tell us as much as you want to. But yeah, if you could start us there, and then we'll dive into what you're doing now.
You know, it's interesting. We always find our passion through our pain, so to speak. And I spent over 30 years as a dental hygienist. So ever since I was in high school, I was in a dental office working, taking x-rays, cleaning teeth, and of course ended up doing that as a living and as a profession. And, you know, in 2008, the United States had a major economic meltdown.
Yeah.
And I still am living in California in the United States, but I got downsized in 2010, the year I turned 50. I was celebrating my 50th birthday, planning the trip, all excited. And 1 week after telling me I had job security, my boss called me into her office and said she was cutting my days, cutting my hours, and reducing my salary.
Yeah.
And so as the main breadwinner, I had a couple of kids in college. I was just married to my husband a year, and we had mortgages and all the responsibility, and I was devastated. But I also knew that it happened for me. You know, we always hear these things happen to you, not for you. And I knew with the freedom lifestyle I wanted to live, I could not be an employee. What do you do at the age of 50, right? Do you go back to school? Do you learn a new something? And I was going through that interview process, which was quite humiliating, with all the young people out of school getting the jobs that the older, more experienced, which means higher salaried people were being passed over for. And I read a book about network marketing. But the guy who wrote the book was famous for real estate investing and financial education. And I decided to hear what he had to offer. And I went to a workshop, and I was blown away about how many passive streams of income that you could invest in, especially in real estate, and create a business, an investment business. And so I signed up for coaches and mentors and training to learn how to be a real estate investor. And that was about a 2 to 3 year commitment that I made while I was still working. So I was still working, you know, I had found a job, but I was taking classes, traveling, being mentored, building the business, and cooking, and laundry, and shopping. You know, I know a lot of you ladies can relate to the superwoman syndrome that we all have. And, you know, and as a controller, I wanted it all to be just right. But that cost me. That cost me in my health. That cost me in my well-being. And that actually cost me in my relationship, because I was burnt out. I was stressed out. I was overwhelmed. I was putting all this pressure on me to do everything, do it all perfectly, create the business, have that success. And I lost sight of really what was important. I didn't take care of my health. I wasn't sleeping properly. I was just in that energy of doing. And so, you know, one day I remember coming home from a trip I took with my husband to Mexico, because we were having some problems communicating. We were short and impatient with each other. And I had that overwhelmed energy that, you know, we've all experienced at some point. And I remember he was out walking the dog, and I picked up his phone to look at a project that I knew he had pictures on his phone. And that's when I discovered that my husband was falling in love with another woman. And there was infidelity in my marriage. And so, the thing was, Edwina, I knew that I shared the responsibility of that because of the energy that I was bringing to not only the relationship, but in everything I was doing. It was always work. It was always at the computer. It was always building the business, making the offers, doing the deals, getting the education. And I lost sight of why I was doing it all, that family freedom lifestyle. And, what ended up happening was we made a commitment to rebuild our relationship, to work towards the relationship we both wanted and deserved, because we were hurting separately. And so we got to come together to heal the hurt. And it was a hard process. It was a messy breakdown, so to speak. And the only way out was through, and that was painful. And we didn't know if the breakdown would lead to a breakup or a breakthrough, to be honest with you. Fortunately for us, we really got closer together and built a new relationship. And so when we talk about my journey to entrepreneurship, that actually got me to coaching the way I coach now. So my coaching started in the real estate space as I was successful in building that business. We were actually inducted into the Hall of Fame as one of their success stories. And because of that, I was invited to coach and mentor new investors. But I realized, and I know we talked about this a little bit off camera, it wasn't the process of how to invest that was keeping people from success, but it was their habits, their mindsets. They weren't set up to create a win-win environment. So they were sacrificing either making the investment in the coaching, but not implementing, or it was costing them in other areas of their lives. And it was through all of those experiences that I got certified as a high performance coach, so that I could help busy professionals really reach that next level of success and advance their careers without sacrificing their personal fulfillment in the process. So that's how my journey of entrepreneurship went through that long and winding road to where I am today.
The mindset piece is just, it's everything. Oh my goodness. And I know, my background was in naturopathy and functional nutrition and helping people to, overcome, with chronic illnesses and all sorts of things. And it was the same. So we can give all the information, but then they would get home with the supplements or the recommendations for the diet or the exercise or all these different things. And it's the mindset that gets in the way. It's like, if we set up a mindset of deprivation, if I can't have that anymore, then suddenly that's the only thing that you want. So it's,
I know.
Oh yeah. Anybody that's ever said, I'm never going to eat chocolate again, completely understands that, because as soon as we get that mindset piece wrong and the language wrong that we're using, then the brain's set up for disaster. So
funny, I just want to respond to that a little bit. I have a coach now that I work with, and he says, usually when you go through mindset coaching, the only thing that changes is your mind. So you need the mindset and you need habits that creates that sustainable change, the consistency. And that's why I love high performance so much, because most people think that, oh, I'm not a high performer, because they think athletics, or they think, Fortune 500 companies or these top level executives. No, we get to be high performers in our lives, which means we set ourselves up to win our days, weeks, months, our quarters, our years, and what that looks like for us personally. It might be, especially for a lot of women who are managing their own work life with the effects of the pandemic, maybe having kids at home, homeschooling. How can you set up the structure so that you're effective and productive and have the energy to wear all of the hats? And all of these things go into high performance.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I point my clients, I know my clients will be tuning into this, but to the high performance habits that you're talking about, because I just know how valuable they are. So for those that are listening that have no idea what we're talking about, would you give us a little breakdown so that there is an understanding?
Well, there are really 5 core tenets around high performance that I walk my clients through, which is the basic foundation before we move into mastery. And that is around your clarity.
Yeah.
You've got to be clear. I know a lot of people I work with really are struggling with being clear on where they should direct their focus. Because when your priorities and your values are clear, decision making becomes easy. And that's a quote from Roy Disney, by the way, but it's so true, because root word of decision is decide, to cut out, side. And people are trying to do too much, are trying to do it all, be it all, so that they can have it all. And when you get clear on where to focus your effort and energy and your time, then you know what to say yes to and what to say no to. So we work on clarity.
Can I interrupt you just for 1 second there? Because I think it's, in the book, as I've asked each of you, some of the people reading it might be wondering why I asked the questions that I asked. And yeah, it is really insightful to see that each of the phenomenal feminine entrepreneurs that I'm interviewing know who they are as a woman. If you ask them, what are the character traits or what are the ways of being that you aspire to or that you live into, they can answer that. What are your values? They can answer that. How do you use vision, which is another word for clarity? They can answer that. They might seem like simple things, but they are absolutely life-changing. So I just wanted to draw the line there that gives people an understanding of the questions in the book.
Yeah, and most people are a little bit confused about maybe who they are, what their role is. If you're in transition, like most women who have reached a certain age where maybe the children are starting to go off to university and they're going through that transition. I know that can be bittersweet. I remember it with my own, gosh, I started in kindergarten. When my last one went to kindergarten, I cried probably for the next 10 years after that. Like, oh my God, no more kids, little backpacks, they were so cute. But anyway, we go through the journey of life, and we get to be clear on what we want to create so we can make the right decisions and know where to focus our energy. And speaking of energy, we have, after clarity, we work on your energy. And not only your physical energy, but your mental stamina, your emotional energy, so that we can be our best. We can't perform at our best if we're not feeling our best. So much goes into our energy. There's health, there's nutrition, there's energy for performance. Most of us, if we are overachievers and highly driven, we eat to satisfy hunger most of the time. Because we're working. But when you start to eat to create energy for performance, it can be a game changer. When you learn how to rest your brain and get enough sleep so that you can be clear and focused in your thoughts, that's a game changer as well. So, and then we work on courage. That's the third tenet, core tenet of high performance, where we need to be taking bold action and stepping up and being seen and being our authentic self and our creative expression. Like, so many things go into that as well. So we've got courage, we've got productivity, which is not just busy work. It is really being effective in the use of your time and your effort and your energy. How can we create the most effectiveness? How can we remove distractions and competing interests? What competing interests are pulling us away from our main focus and priorities and goals? That dang social media is a black hole that you can get lost in so easy. So how can we set ourselves up to have our social media time, but not get sucked into the black hole? For me, it can be, shoes on sale that pop up in the corner. So I got to turn off those notifications. I know, right?
Yeah. I mentioned that social media one, the unplugging, ties into the energy as well. So it's just such a trap. I know for myself that I have to be constantly vigilant with it, because I can just look up. Even last night I was talking to my son after dinner, and realized that we were both on our phones. And I was just like, oh, for goodness sake, here I go again. It's like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, half an hour. It's so easy just to lose yourself in that scroll.
Mm-hmm. I would recommend that people have no screens at least an hour before bed.
Yeah.
But really start to wind down about 3 hours so that you get a good restful sleep. I mean, I wear blue light glasses. I used to always wear contacts when I was on video like this, but it's more just for vanity reasons, but it's more important for me to protect my eyes because so many of us all of our work is done on computers. Unless we're outside in construction, we are on computers all of the time. And so it's really important to protect the energy so that you can get a good night's sleep to rest your brain. I recommend around at least 7 to 8 hours of sleep per night, but also setting yourself up to have a good sleep when you do go to bed, because how many of us have so much on our minds that we lie in bed even for an hour or two before actually falling asleep. So yeah, we work on habits that actually support us to get good rest and have really good energy, because when you think about it, a power plant doesn't have energy, it generates energy. So how can we set ourselves up to generate the energy we need to be on our A game at home and at work and in our communities? We don't want our families getting our leftovers because we've spent all our energy in the day on everybody else. And that can be a problem. And then the fifth one is influence. How can we challenge people to be their best around us? How can we be a role model? How can we encourage people to think differently or have different perspectives? And with the year that we just had, we saw so many polarizing ideas, and people were blaming and shaming and guilting people and making people wrong. How can we really structure our conversation and our communication in a way that is influential? And so those are really the 5 core tenets that we work on in high performance, and you can see how it benefits every area of your life.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the polarizing conversations and the heated the anger and so on that has I've noticed over the last 2 years over various things. I mean, obviously the Black Lives Matter movement, which I know you were an amazing leader in that time. I mean, you have been for a long time, but I particularly noticed your leadership during that period. And I actually interviewed somebody yesterday, Rachel Peterson, who she shared a post that said, I believe 100% of the time 100% of people should be on vacation, should take a vacation. If not, they should be forced to. And people read it as vaccination. I mean, it was designed to be a bit of but she lost 800 people in a day from that post because they read
I saw
vaccination.
That. I think I saw that post a while ago, and people read it wrong, and it was really saying vacation. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, so it is where we're very triggered. So taking that time to unplug and really, take responsibility for how we're showing up is huge. So I think if we can go back to responsibility, my ears really pricked up when you talked about discovering that your husband was having an affair and how you took responsibility for your part in that. I mean, that's a very unique conversation. And I know, I went through a marriage breakup. My husband left. I had 4 children under 8 when he walked away. And I talked about myself and the story in my head as a victim. Very much for a long time, probably for several years, that I was the victim of this story. And it wasn't until I understood responsibility and that I'm not a victim of anything, that I played a part in things and my way of being, and that was actually an amazingly life-changing understanding that I'm responsible for how happy I am in this world. And the minute that you make somebody else responsible for that, you're giving away all your power. So let's talk a bit more about radical responsibility and your understanding of it and how it plays out in the decisions that you've made.
You know, I have this formula that I run in my head. It's called S, the letter S, plus R equals R. You have your situation plus your reaction or your response. You have a choice there equals the results. So you have a choice in what you add to the situation. So you can act responsibly or you can have a knee-jerk triggered reaction, and that will create the result that you have. And, you know, for me, I knew my husband was a really good, integrous person, one of the most integrous people I know. And he was the last person that I would expect to have an affair and fall in love with someone else. And I remember when realized we were having problems, we tried couples therapy, it didn't work. It just ended up frustrating us more. And, you know, like we've talked about before, sometimes we just pick the wrong therapist or we have the wrong coach. And so, you know, it's not that we get to give up, we just get to regroup and find someone that's a better fit. But, you know, my husband's European, so he's German. So I like to say he's got that stubborn German European, you know, let me just stereotype him right there, but it's part of our family joke anyway. He's the first one to say it. But my point was, I remember distinctly thinking, oh my God, what did I do to cause a good man to self-sabotage like that? It really was the first thing. And it wasn't that I was blaming myself. And it wasn't that I was a victim of it. It's that I had responsibility. I got to own a part of the breakdown. And so, you know, I don't want people to hear that I blame myself for his. We just weren't communicating. I went through, and a lot of entrepreneurs can probably relate to this. Well, as soon as I make enough money, I'll work on this. Or as soon as I have that, or as soon as this happens, then I can focus on this. Or, you know, as soon as I lose weight, then I'll go, you know, it's all of those as soon as. And I remember doing that in our relationship. Well, as soon as we had a target goal of how many real estate holdings we wanted to have, that would give us our financial freedom. So as soon as that happened, I could slow down work and wait. And then I realized at one point, it was like, holy crap, I could lose it all. You know, there's no point in us having our vacation home in Germany, which we do have. Like, I'm not going to go there by myself. I don't speak German. Like, I'm about to lose it all. And it's just like, oh my God. And then my next thought was like, this is going to be a really amazing story to tell one day. Without knowing what the future holds, but knowing that we came to a choice point of, let's see what we can rebuild out of this. And it, you know, and I always knew that there was a possibility that we could look at each other and say, you know what, we gave it our best shot. It's not going to work. Or it could be a great remodel, you know, using real estate metaphors, since we were rehabbing houses a lot then. And the challenge for me was staying out of fear, staying out of the past, staying out of bringing up the past. We worked through what happened, the incident, and how long it had been going on in therapy. And then we both went on. He went on to individual therapy. I hired a relationship coach. And the challenge was for me, as someone who was a potential victim, was number one, I never reached out to people that I thought would bash my husband. I was in a community, you were, I believe, in a similar community as well, a leadership community that surrounded me with love and support. And the, you know, community is important and support is important. And when we're talking about high performance, that surrounded me with, you know what, you guys could, you know, people regenerate and rejuvenate after something like this. It doesn't mean the end of it. No one bashed my husband. No one. I surrounded myself with people that weren't like, girl, you should leave him. And I would burn his clothes and I would, that wasn't going to happen in my space. And if anybody did that, they were out.
Yeah.
And my children were incredibly supportive. They had gone through leadership as well. So I knew that they would be a part of the story, because even though they're his stepchildren, we're incredibly tight-knit family. And so for me to stay in the past and bring up the past and be worried that it would happen again kept me from being in present creation.
Yeah.
And on the other side of that, worrying about the future. Well, what if it happens again? Will I be able to trust him? All of that. Yeah, it took a while to rebuild trust, don't get me wrong. And it wasn't easy, but what helped me, and if there's anybody out there going through something similar and wants to, work through it and see if they can rebuild, we didn't repair. And I want to be very distinct about it. We didn't repair our old relationship. We built a new one.
Yeah.
And that took staying present in the moment and in creation.
Yeah, that's such a powerful story. And I just think, we can look at it in so many different areas. I mean, it's not just relationships, but, I don't think I've ever spoken to somebody that hasn't been through hard things, and being in that place, we can choose if we're going to be the victim of that scenario or take responsibility, which is creates a very, very different outcome. You talked about the community that held you up and supported you at that time. In our book, I talk about who are the voices that you tune into. And I just think I like to highlight that as much as possible, because it just is so critically important in this journey, this wonderful journey called life, to be surrounded by the people that are giving you the right messages and giving you the messages that pull you up. So I'm so glad that you had that community around you at that time.
Oh, it was so special. I'd never had a community like that before. So that was new to me. When I went on this journey of entrepreneurship, I intentionally surrounded myself with people who would pull me up, whether it was in business, in life in general. And that meant a lot of friendships had shifted. I didn't have to get rid of a lot of friendships, but it was the amount of investment in those friendships shifted, and they were limited if they were, I would say naysayers, or people who say you can't do that, and why are you doing this, and how are you going to build this real estate empire and all of that, or be critical of it. So I was really intentional in the community that I surrounded myself in, and I know that was part of my ability to take responsibility.
Yeah. We touched on leadership. We have a couple of times in this conversation, but feminine leadership is something that I think, I really love to address and talk about as much as possible, because I actually think it begins in our home. As women, we are examples of, to our children, to our husbands and partners, and then to the community and the people around us. And, it grows from there if you wanted to. And I think for a lot of people that hear the word leadership, they're thinking of heads of companies, or, it's leaders of state or country, or, these positions that we don't see ourselves in. But I think, it is really amazing to see ourselves as leaders starting in our homes. I know that, as I mentioned earlier, I saw your leadership amazingly during the Black Lives Matters movement, and your continued voice in that area. I just imagine the incredible vulnerability that took for you to speak up. And so I'd just love to, if we can talk about that a little bit, in your experience through that time and what it took to really step into your leadership then.
That's a really interesting question, because that was new for me. I had never stepped up in my leadership in that particular area before, but we had an incredibly visible, polarizing event with the murder of George Floyd in this country that was caught on videotape. And it was to the point where people in the Black community got used to members of our community being brutalized by police. We got used to it, unfortunately. And I had initially thought, oh, another one. And I didn't watch the video until it just didn't go away in the news. And I'm like, okay, why is this one staying in the news? Like, I didn't get it. I didn't pay much attention to it because I had created a callous and a numbness to hearing about it, these incidents. And then I watched that video and it broke me. It broke me to the point where I couldn't stop crying. Now, if you ask either of my adult children or my husband, are like, Mommy doesn't cry. What's wrong with Mommy? She doesn't cry. I can be very stoic at times, unless there's a puppy video, and that's a conversation for another day. I'm like, oh, animals. But for some reason, I could not. It was uncontrollable sobs night after night after night. Now, my husband is not Black or African American, blonde hair, blue-eyed. What I appreciate about him the most was he didn't belittle it to the point where it'll be all right or it'll be over. He just held me in my feelings and let me process them. And for me, it was, I think I was launching a group program at the time. And I was like, how can I go back to business as usual and act like this didn't happen? But what could I do? It was COVID. People were protesting. We were on lockdown. What could I do? I had to do something. And so part of my morning routine as a high performer is to sit in meditation. And in my morning meditation, I just needed to be shown, what can I do? I have to do something, but what? And I realized in that moment, with what I was seeing on social media, we talked about social media a lot, that people were trying to voice their support of Black lives, but they were saying things like all lives matter, and I don't see color. And that was a problem for us in the Black community, to not be seen. And, it's like I'm doing a breast cancer fundraiser and you're going to come to me and it's like, well, all cancer matters. Why aren't you doing it for lung cancer? I mean, that was the equivalent of it, but people weren't seeing it. But what I saw was the heart and the intention. Even though their foot was being put in their mouths and people were criticizing, and that whole cancel culture started. People were being really brutalized by any mistake you made on social media. And I thought, I can support white people, white presenting people, people of privilege, and having a safe space to learn, to have resources, and to really be in the work of true allyship without the judgment and the hatred and the criticism. So I started my Facebook group, The Intimacy of Race, but I also put on a live forum called the Allyship Awareness Forum. And it was a listen and learn event where myself and 5 other leading women of color, presented on different topics for people to understand and hear what we were feeling, because it was time to be heard, for us to be heard. And it was like, we needed a knee lifted off of our neck. And, it was such a metaphor, the way George Floyd died. It opened up a lot of our voices that had been silent. And so out of that, I was inspired to write a book called The Intimacy of Race as well. And it really is what I feel is digestible. It's not learning all of history all over again, but really, what can we do as individuals to implement sustainably in our everyday lives that shows that we really want to create a system where everyone is included and treated.
I'm so grateful to you for the work that you did, because I knew in that time, I've got a lot of clients in America. I was speaking to people in America every day throughout that whole time. And I found myself feeling completely inadequate in knowing the language to use, what was right or what was wrong. But I was so determined not to just be silent. And so I was very grateful to you for the resources that you put out and the the loving way that you supported us to know the right language and to learn to do better. So I just wanted to really address that and to thank you.
Mhm. Yeah, that was my intention, because it's just like, oh my goodness, if your child was learning to walk and fell down a lot, like, are you going to scream at your baby and cancel them? Like, no, you're going to say, honey, try again. Here's how you do it.
Yeah.
Hold on first.
Yeah.
Before you try to run,
Yeah.
And I saw the well-intentioned hearts in the white community, but I also knew that it was so new for it to be in your face like this. And it was an opportunity for you to just sit back and listen and hear and learn kind of a new way of being that was more supportive. And so, yeah, that's what I really wanted to create.
Yeah. And I think it is a role in leadership to be prepared to have these hard conversations. I know, my sister died a couple of years ago, and I had other people that have had loss in their lives, and I can watch and I experience myself. People shut down. They want to say the perfect thing. They don't know how to say the perfect thing, so they say nothing. And it is just this willingness to say, I am here and I really want to support and I really want to know what to say. How can I help? How can I support? And being willing to actually have those conversations.
Yeah. Fear of saying or doing the wrong thing is powerful in humanity. And so the silence is more deafening than you saying the wrong things, because I see it as, well, at least you're making an effort. It may be an imperfect effort, but it's an effort. So you get an A for effort. The school system, I think, has really punished us for mistakes, and then we bring that into our adult lives so strongly that it has us hold back way too much.
We're still looking for the A. We're still looking for the A or for the gold star. It's got to be right. It's right or wrong, that kind of.
And part of the issue I had with a lot of leaders that I was in their community or witnessed in leadership in other communities was the silence in the leadership and not addressing, members of their community who may be hurting because of this incident, and acting like it didn't happen and going back to business as usual. I personally had to take stock of whose community I wanted to be in after that, by watching how they handled the situation without even, addressing and making a declaration that, I want to learn how to support, or even checking in. How are you doing? How are you feeling? How can I, like you said, how can I support you? There was not even a check-in. It was just coming from a place of supremacy with in a subject that you didn't know much about. And so I got to really take a good look at the leaders that I was in community with, and made some changes in my life because of that.
Yeah. Well, that's, this is what this, an underlying piece of this whole series is about. Be mindful of the voices that you're tuning into and that you surround yourself with. Eva, I know that you have a beautiful gift for our audience. Could you take a minute to let them know what that is?
I'm going to give them a download, give you lovely people a download of the essential pillars of high performance. And these pillars are what high performers use to keep focus. They're questions that you ask yourself that will help you keep focus, avoid the distractions, and raise productivity in your life and business. And so there are 6 areas where you can ask specific questions that keep you pulled into focus. So, like, is this activity going to support what I'm creating today or in my life or for the week or for the year? And so really some key questions that'll help you become a high performer.
That's so generous. That's so generous. Thank you. As a final question, I'd love to ask you, because everybody's got a different answer to this. And that is, what does living a rich and prosperous life look like to you?
I see a rich and prosperous life of a life of energy.
Mhm.
You know, I see feeling rich in energy, and I feel that having freedom,
Mhm.
you know, and having the energy to enjoy that freedom.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when I say freedom, I mean freedom to choose how you design your life.
Yeah.
That's freedom for me. And that, you know, yes, you need finances. Yes, you need the abundance to have the freedom to make the choices. You know, with more money, you have more choices. You
Mm.
know, I heard it once described, if you have $1 for lunch, your choices are limited as opposed to having $5 for lunch.
Yeah.
You have a lot more choices of where to eat. So I love the freedom of having the abundance to make the choices for my life, but also the energy to enjoy them.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Perfect way to end this interview. Thank you so much for your time, Eva. It's been an absolute delight.
Thank you, Edwina.